from talking to partners and consultants, a lot of them aren't satisfied with how good these tools are and just don't use them. A small specialist consulting firm can outperform a global consultancy because they go a bit deeper and they understand the industry economics. AI is the big one. And the big discussion now is, how is AI going to change the consulting pyramid, right? I think scale wins on breadth, but specialization wins a bit more on trust. Consulting firm's perspective is like, what's the revenue story and what is the likely success of a partner joining a firm? There's a lot of politics and personalities and sort of ego stuff involved. They're not convinced that these firms are moving quick enough given the pace of change with AI. I just can't see a day where C-suite executives are going to be happy to talk to an AI and run their entire strategy through it.
All right, welcome back everyone to a new episode of Business Unbound, where we dive into conversations with visionary leaders from every corner of the globe to bring you insights, inspiration, and the real stories behind success. I'm your host, Florian Hoff. Today, I'm joined by Ben Appleton. Ben is the founder of Stratbridge, a specialized executive search and advisory firm focused exclusively on the management and strategy consulting industry. Ben is at a rare vantage point in this consulting world. Through his firm, he actually works with global consulting firms and senior leaders across UK, Germany, Switzerland, North America, and beyond, helping them build capability at the partner and director level. That puts Ben at the intersection of three of the most consequential shifts happening in consulting right now. First, there is the AI revolution. Consulting firms such as McKinsey have stated publicly that they have deployed about 12,000 AI agents across their firm and thereby reducing their project teams from, on average, 15 plus people to just 4. And this is not a side project. This is a fundamental reinvention of how consulting gets delivered. Second, the market is bifurcating. Large platforms are doubling down on scale and integration, and at the same time, highly specialized boutique firms are winning clients by offering depth, agility, and credibility in specific domains, often outcompeting the giants on speed, cost, and customization. And third, the rules for senior hiring have quietly changed. At the partner level, firms care less about project experience and more about commercial gravity, sector credibility, and the ability to bring in new business. Many candidates miss this shift entirely, and it costs them, sometimes their career. In today's conversation, Ben unpacks all three of these forces. We will explore what AI really means for consulting teams and junior talent. We will map the two-tier market and why it's likely to intensify rather than converge. And we will have a candid conversation about partner-level moves, what firms are actually looking for, what makes a move successful, and why changing firms at that level is fundamentally from any other career transition. This is Business Unbound. Let's dive in. Quick moment of honesty. Business Unbound is brand new. We are in the early days of something that I genuinely believe in, a show dedicated to real conversations with forward-thinking business leaders and inspiring individuals who are having a real impact on this world. And that's where you come in. I need your help. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any podcast app, please follow the show and leave a rating. It sounds simple, but it shows the algorithms that this content matters, and it directly impacts how many ambitious professionals like you discover these conversations. When you're helping me, you're not just supporting the show. Here's what you're really doing. You're saying that quality business conversations deserve a platform. You're saying substance matters over hype. And you're saying this mission is worth building. So if this resonates with you, help me reach others like you. Subscribe, follow, and share whatever works for wherever you are. You're helping me build something substantial from the ground up, and I genuinely appreciate it. So thank you. And now back to the show. Ben Appleton, welcome to Business Unbound.
Hey, Florian. Thanks for the invite.
Ben, before we dive into what you are seeing in the market right now, how would you explain to someone in, let's say, the wider business community what it actually is that you're doing?
Yeah. Cool. Hello, everybody. Ben Appleton, based in London. If you can hear an accent, it is a New Zealand accent, although I've been in London for 10 years. So there's probably going to be a few things from the Southern Hemisphere which are a bit different on here. But in terms of what I do, so we are a search and headhunting firm focused on the strategy consulting, management consulting space. Essentially, we focus on partner hires. Yes, we do some director work, and if I look above that, team moves as well. But essentially, we're working with consulting firms to determine sort of where they're going. Every partner hire has a clear business case around it, and my role provides a unique vantage point where I can, one, look into a firm, but also look across all their competitors. And from what I've found out over the years is there's some resounding themes that are very, very clear across the consulting space, no matter what firm you're at. And the other thing I quickly notice is a lot of consultants within these firms at times do live in silos where you're quite focused on what your particular firm does, and maybe you haven't done the SWOT analysis in terms of what other firms do. So yeah, that's essentially my role. I work with senior leaders from one perspective to help them bring talent into a firm, and then from the other perspective, I work with senior leaders from a candidate side, assisting them in finding the right platform for their experience and their ambition, essentially.
And I understand, Ben, that in the work that you are doing, you focus at the partner level and the director level, and that seems to be a very deliberate choice. I'm wondering, why did you decide to specialize so narrowly instead of building a generalist executive search business?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess these hires influence where sectors and capabilities are heading within a firm. It's the level of investment that they're looking to deploy in this area. It's at this level you can really figure out the direction of consulting, essentially, because you're talking to senior leaders and you can figure out where the growth areas are. And if I can quickly just talk about that, like 5 years ago, automotive was big, right? If I look at Germany, but it's just not as big as it is now, or it was, sorry. So it also offers me an interesting vantage point to see what the future trends are. And at the moment, that's completely focused on AI transformation, AI strategy, what that looks like. And then also the industries powering AI. So energy, chip manufacturing, and then of course, aerospace and defense. We can't talk about where consulting is going without talking about other big growth areas due to geopolitics. So we made a definitive decision to focus on this area because it does distinguish for smaller firms like success or failure, and for larger firms, it's a clear market signal about where things are heading. So we wanted to be at sort of, I guess, the vanguard and have a view on the future whilst working with these firms and working with partners that share their insights with us.
Mm. And Ben, before we get into the actual weeds of our conversation, for the benefit of our audience members, could you spend a few more words on what made you start Stratbridge in the first place, and maybe what your previous experience in the consulting market was?
Yeah, absolutely. I started Stratbridge about 5 years ago. And prior to that, I'd been working for an additional 5 years in professional services, mostly management consulting across the UK and Germany. The reason for starting it was I saw a bit of a gap in the market. Like obviously we have some competitors, but I didn't feel that area of the market was well looked after. And to be completely honest, I really do enjoy talking to partners and directors in strategy consulting and just trying to figure out where things are going. Obviously, consulting, there's a high bar for entry, the IQ mixed with the EQ. So if I can talk from a complete selfish perspective, I really do enjoy every conversation because you're usually talking to a market leader within their niche or sub-niche in consulting. Yeah, I've had some very, very, without revealing too much, interesting conversations over the years with consultants that were perhaps C-suite executives in firms that dominate the news and discussions on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That resonates well with me and my own observations. And your firm operates across the UK, DACH, so Germany, Austria, Switzerland,
Yeah.
and beyond. And you said you started 5 years ago. You're also embedded with in networks with some of the largest consulting firms in the world, but also with boutiques and mid-market players. And based on your experience, how has your perspective on the consulting market evolved over the last couple of years? What is changing? What are the trends that you're seeing?
Yeah, it's a good question. Consulting can be quite hard to figure out what is happening inside, because a lot of firms do keep things quite close. But I guess my vantage point is I get to speak to partners from a candidate and client perspective, and they do share quite a bit more than it, and it doesn't always match the marketing of a lot of these firms. But look, I think in terms of the key themes that I've seen that have changed, AI is the big one. And the big discussion now is, how is AI going to change the consulting pyramid, right? Like the partners at the top, and then the principals, managers, senior consultants and analysts. Now that a lot of the work at more junior levels can be automated by AI, or consultants can now do the work of, I don't know, 2 to 3 consultants 2 to 3 years ago. Like, the pyramid is changing, and I can see that. I can see hiring trends from large firms and also small firms trying to adapt to this, and have spent some time actually on these challenger AI platforms. So the software platforms that are, you see this on LinkedIn all the time. Consulting's dead.
Yeah.
Look at this software; it's completely going to change things. And I have looked at these softwares, and I'm not convinced actually that we're there. But I am convinced that things are going to change. The pyramid is changing. What will it be? I'm not too sure. People talk about a diamond. Others talk about maybe a bit of a tower structure. So that's definitely number one. But also, things don't change, right? Like, consulting still is a trust and network business, and I haven't yet seen any AI indicators that say that is going to change. At the end of the day, clients and consulting, like, it is a human to human relationship, and I just can't see a day where C-suite executives are going to be happy to talk to an AI platform and run their entire strategy through it. So yeah, definitely the AI, but the thing I haven't seen change is the trust and problem solving judgment network bit of consulting is still the same. But AI is the big change over the years, and of course everything around that industry has ramped up energy supply, or energy transition, energy supply to power the AI revolution or evolution, however we want to call it. And, consulting reacts to the macroeconomics, and essentially where their clients want to deploy capital. And that changes every year, to be honest. As I mentioned earlier, 5 years ago, aerospace and defense wasn't a interesting growth area. It was quite steady, and now it's where every consultancy is either trying to build a practice if they don't have one, or trying to attract the right people if they do have one, to try and build out the network there.
And conversely, I mean, if you think back about ESG and ESG related topics, this was a trend, certainly at least five years ago, and it carried on for quite some time. These days, I would say that it's very, very rare for material clients to spend significant budgets on these topics, as they also evolve in their strategy and decide where they want to allocate their own capital and where they want to spend on professional services.
Yeah, completely. Maybe 3 or 4 years ago, ESG, sustainability particular, was the growth space, especially given EU directives around this and what needed to be done, which to a degree has been watered down, but is still being done. But now in the last 3 years, I just haven't seen any sort of request for a search mandate within this area because of the change in geopolitics, right? If we look what's happening in the US and the downgrade and sustainability from that administration there, and then in the EU, how that has affected it. So yeah, it's interesting. Some things were, the shiny sort of whiz kid of the industry, and now they've disappeared over a few year period. And sustainability is definitely one of them. ESG as well. There is still some work here, but I think it's more targeted as opposed to required across every project.
Ben, then let's talk further about AI and the transformation of consulting delivery, so to speak. And if you look at the news, there are reports about companies such as McKinsey, where they claim they have deployed about 12,000 AI agents the last time that I checked, and that their teams have shrunk on average from 15 plus people to 4 people. When you talk to consulting firms about what they are seeing in the context of AI and what they are viewing and how they are seeing the market, do they perceive it rather as a threat or as an opportunity?
It's a good question. And I think a bit of both, right? Like with the large firms, from talking to people within them, I know they're not convinced that these firms are moving quick enough given the pace of change with AI, and the change happens like daily and weekly, right? So it's quite hard to change it there. But maybe my headlines here is, are they changing? Yes. Are they changing quick enough? I don't think so. I have seen a lot of communication from these firms around the amount of AI agents that are being used. And then there's the counter to that, of course, is, look, you can have 12,000, 25,000 AI agents, but the main bit is what those agents are actually doing and what the output looks like. And it can be quite hard, right? Because I talk to consultants within these firms who say, yes, we've got these platforms that we use and then well published, but no one really uses these platforms in-house because they just do not produce the work that the PR and marketing campaign of the firm says they do produce. So again, it takes a bit of work, and it can be quite hard to distinguish how these firms are changing internally. Yes, they've got these tools, they market these tools, but from talking to partners and consultants, a lot of them aren't satisfied with how good these tools are and just don't use them. So it can be quite hard. And then, of course, the other point is maybe to go back to the changing shape of the pyramid and talking about the hiring effects on this. Some of these firms are talking about bringing in less juniors, but I haven't yet seen that either. I've seen some firms sort of target their junior hiring and change the criteria, but I haven't yet seen a massive change in that space. And like that leads to another thing, right? Like how's the apprenticeship model of bringing people up through to analyst partner? If the funnel at the bottom is a lot more slimmer, then I'm not too sure what the result is of those that actually get to partner. And there's another point which probably isn't talked about enough, but I hear quite often, is there's a lot of stress and expectation put on this middle layer, this sort of director manager level, because they are running the projects, and there is a newer cohort in junior consultants that maybe aren't as keen to do the sort of long hour apprenticeship for 3 to 5 years that the partners would have done. So there is quite a bit of change happening. But I guess, look, key points are AI is accelerating sort of research, benchmarking, and the initial analysis. What's the future going to look like? I'd probably say smaller teams with more senior involvement. And And then clients are expecting faster insights and more partner involvement on that. Those are probably like the main points. Yeah, go for it.
And they are all consistent with my own observations. And when you explain that you see that, especially for junior hires, maybe the criteria have slightly changed, or that firms are looking for a different skill set, what exactly does this mean?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't do too much work at junior hiring, but I do talk to the partners that do run it. And I'm still trying to distinguish this, to be honest. I know a lot of firms are looking for consultants that know how to operate AI. So still very popular as someone that understands code, maybe was a software engineer, and then is getting into consulting because, they can talk to the software engineer and they should be able to talk to the CTO, CIO. But then I also see signs in the market, and McKinsey released this a few weeks ago, that, the classic engineering focus or STEM degree isn't necessarily essential anymore. I know they are looking at sort of liberal arts degrees and other degrees that sort of look more at problem solving and interpretation as opposed to engineering, where I think it's a bit more black and white without really simplifying that degree.
Right. And does this mean that, in a nutshell, that they are trying to hire more for character and for personal character traits that these individuals bring, and approaches to analytical thinking and problem solving and emotional intelligence, whereas the more technical aspects that some work requires, where, okay, it's good to have a basic understanding and to be very adaptive of technology and even artificial intelligence, but really that this commingles into a new type of junior talent that firms are looking for?
I think so. I think they're doubling down on maybe what would have been considered old school a few years ago, which is more, the judgment and the problem solving pieces, and not necessarily the technical or mathematical understanding of something, but the ability to apply judgment into a problem. And from what I've seen on the market, that has resulted in sort of, the target degrees opening up hugely at these firms.
And on the level that you're typically hiring at and you're exposed to, what's the profile that is being most sought after at the moment at the director or partner level? What is it that firms are looking for?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there has been a bit of consistency here, that the industry focus is still the primary focus. So I've got our industry focuses: automotive, manufacturing, financial services, and then the functional T that goes across that a lot of consulting firms talk about is are they more focused on AI and data? Are they more focused on performance improvement? From what I can see, there still is consistency that firms prefer to look for an industry specialist as opposed to a functional specialist. And my presumption here is, when you're hiring a partner, it's a revenue story, right? And presumption on that is that if someone is an industry specialist, they should have 3 to 5 clients to help with that revenue story, as opposed to maybe a functional partner. Not saying it's a bad thing, but a functional partner maybe is usually brought in by an industry lead to sort of work on the project, and then they sort of work cross industry. So that's a theme I think has been consistent, is at partner hiring, firms do look more at industry experts and the revenue story or the client base around that industry expert.
And then if we zoom out a little bit further and look at the market as a whole, an aspect that can be observed at the moment, at least from where I'm sitting, from my perspective, is that there are two models that sort of stand out at the moment, where you have global platforms, the big players that try to win on scale, on global footprint, on integrated capability. And on the other hand, you have specialized boutique firms, and they are winning on specialization, on speed and credibility in very narrow domains. Would you agree to this? And if yes, why do you think this is happening right now?
Yeah, I definitely would. I think scale wins on breadth, but specialization wins a bit more on trust. And they are essentially the two things I'm seeing. There's one other as well, which I can talk to, but large firms compete completely on scale, integration, capabilities. They're very likely to be able to do the strategy, but also push it through to an execution piece. And that's, I from what I can see, that's the value that they offer. But there are the boutiques, which have done a lot of work in this space. In Germany, there's the hidden champions that maybe they work with the smaller firms that can't afford a large company, the middle start. And these boutiques very much compete on deep expertise and agility, right? They can go outside of the constraints or confines or the variables of larger firms. And in many sectors, a small specialist consulting firm can outperform a global consultancy because they go deeply, or they go a bit deeper and they understand the industry economics.
Mm-hmm.
And they may also, if they're working with a smaller or mid-sized firm, they may understand sort of the power dynamics if it's an owner managed or family owned firm as well. And then of course, the large firms do win a lot on their brand, on what their platform has done previously. And then maybe just a third point I would add there's the mid-sized firms that are coming up. And a lot of this is driven by private equity investment within these firms. They're seen as good firms to hold over a 5 to 7 year cycle, and the return to investors can be quite positive. And I know in the UK, like Grant Thornton is a good example of this. I guess traditionally they wouldn't have played in a strategy consulting space, but they've just received a huge amount of private equity capital. They've then decided, I think they're going to bring on 300 or 400 partners within a set period of time. And that can make a huge difference, right? There's also another firm, Unity Advisory, in the UK, which has equally received capital and is growing. So that's a few different models. Maybe private equity investing in the mid market to bring them up, and then as was the case in the latter example, private equity sort of creating a startup, helping them attract partners to challenge the bigger players. So yeah, and maybe in summary, the bigger platforms do very well. However, with some of them, they can struggle to work across borders because of P&L, discussions within a firm. The hidden champions or the boutique players usually are specialists and can go quite deep, and they do very well. They also they do particularly well from what I see with mid-market clients or middle start that maybe will not go for the big brands. And then the third bit is, of course, the mid players that are coming up, driven heavily by private capital and private equity into the market.
And conversely, what types of consulting firms do you see aren't doing well? Who's losing out on the changes that are happening in this market right now?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think from what I can see, the larger firms, actually completely, it's the larger firms that have really big pyramids, have like quite a bit of headcount within them, are not doing as well, right? Their margins are not the same as the challenger firms, the hidden champions. And I think it is because, as I mentioned earlier, they are still working out how to change. There has been a lot of change within these firms, but from what I know about margins and profit within these firms, the larger ones still are slowly sort of creaking by. But then, of course, there are firms that are completely focused on parts of the market that have done really well over the last 4 to 5 years, those that work in more sort of restructure, turnaround and cost out areas. like they clearly are very relevant, and their economics are doing a lot better than maybe a big four consulting firm that has a huge cost base, and has probably, they have been quite slow or slower to react to what is happening in the market.
And then another interesting aspect that you mentioned was certainly the interest of private equity in professional services firms. And
Yeah.
this is a recent trend, although it is not new. I mean,
Mm.
even if you look at our firm, Alex Partners, which has been owned by private equity in its corporate history for a considerable amount of years. Why do you think private equity is, at least in the mainstream perception, interested in consulting right now?
Yeah, it's a good question. They are interested because I presume they can see the return that's available over the cycle that they choose to invest in these firms. I'm not surprised. Like a firm that focuses on restructure and turnaround in today's current conditions, and probably any conditions really, is probably going to command a lot of clients, margins, etc. So yeah, why are they interested, right? I think they're looking at it from an economic perspective, which of course they would, looking at the return, and I think it can seem quite obvious. So that's my presumption. But then on the flip side of that, right, like some partners that are coming from an equity partnership do not want to join a firm where a good portion of their equity is held outside of the partners. And that would be the flip side of it. But is that a strong undercurrent? I don't think so. That's probably targeted firms that are in particular equity partnerships only want to stay in an equity partnership. But there's pros and cons, right? Because when you do have private equity investment, there's a lot more capital to deploy. And the shift we're seeing at the moment is probably the biggest capital intensive change that's happening in consulting. These firms need to invest in their AI capability, and that's not cheap. It does take quite a bit of money. So it's a balancing act. Do you want to join an equity partnership where maybe a lot of the equity is, or most of it, to be honest, is shared with the partners and there's a lesser pool to reinvest? Or do you want to join a PE-backed firm where a lot of the return or the margin is then reinvested, which is required right now because the AI evolution is hungry for cash and investment.
And for these firms which are cash rich, so to speak, because of the capital influx from private equity, etc., what impact do you think this will have on the competitive dynamics, especially between boutique firms, private equity-backed firms, and the existing set of big four companies or even big three MBB consulting firms?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? Because there are a lot of challenger firms that are still working heavily in this space. But from what I know of them, they will attract people from these big firms because there's a lot more room to operate, but they just don't have the capital to deploy. So they really have to partner with either a larger firm or a platform to ensure they can keep up. And you see this quite often, right? Like a lot of consulting firms will publish their new partnership with OpenAI, with Palantir, with Anthropic, as a way of sending a signal to the market that they are investing in this internally, but also they have partnerships in the market that run quite deep and can help them deploy. And I think OpenAI, I saw this a few weeks ago, therefore four firms they partnered with McKinsey, BCG, Accenture, and Capgemini, which I guess begs the question, right? Like, who are the other models going to partner with? Where's Anthropic looking? Where are the others looking? But it can be quite hard. It can be quite hard for boutiques to keep up in this capital intensive AI field. But from what I can see, they again, going back to my point, they double down more on the judgment and the networks of their partners and the human to human interaction. But not necessarily sort of selling themselves as the big AI expert, but either partnering with these firms or being the strategic advisor next to the board or the C-suite, who also would then partner with these larger, big four and Accenture, Capgemini figures in the market.
Right. And there was an interesting development, maybe you're aware of this as well, in the German market, where Roland Berger, the German consulting firm, they have partnered with the former CEO of one of the German AI company hopes, so to speak, Aleph Alpha. I think the company itself isn't doing as well as the initial hopes and wishes were. And now their former CEO and Roland Berger, they joined forces to apparently set up an AI-driven consulting business. To me, it's not entirely clear yet what it is they intend to do. What do you think about this occurrence? Is this more marketing or has it substance?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's hard to distinguish this early. But look, I think essentially, maybe just take a step back. There's three models to this that I've seen being employed in the market. One is the integration model, right? So AI embedded across existing service lines. The second bit is the platform model, where they build their platform internally. The third bit is this venture model, where they venture with a firm that's already deployed a lot of capital, or an individual in this case, to leverage that expertise, but they maintain the strategy engagement bit. So I'm not sure. I did see this in Handelsblatt and a bit of conversation, and produced a blog on it myself as well. I think it's a positive signal, most definitely. And at this point, like, signals do resonate. But I guess it depends on how that is translated to sort of meaningful projects, engagements, and outcomes for clients. But I think the signal's positive. But there's not much information in the public space around what is actually going to change for that particular engagement. But I did see it. I think Roland Berger is funding the venture, and obviously they have this individual and their expertise.
And we've been talking a lot about Europe so far, and I don't know if you can speak to this. You're talking to a lot of global consulting firms as well. How do you see the developments in the wider AI transformation, changing of the model world in the US, for example, which is arguably still one of the biggest consulting markets, just geographically speaking?
It's a good question. And the US is, we do some work in the US. It's so different from many different avenues. They've got so much more capital to deploy. There's just so much happening. I don't have a complete view on the difference in the US. I just know from a consulting perspective, there's just so much more consulting spend on, AI and building the infrastructure around it. Data centers, it's in the news quite often, likely the reason why the US economy is growing at the moment. But from the consultants I do speak that have a remit in the US or a more global remit, like, it is quite similar. A lot of these firms, no matter their geography, they're a bit hesitant to completely invest here, and the models or their delivery model hasn't changed too much. But they are doing more work in this space, which I know sounds a bit like a non-answer, but it's similar. It's similar. It's similar.
Well, then, Ben, let's perhaps shift our perspective just a little bit and zoom in slightly more on your particular strong suit, which is director level and partner level hiring, which I think is then closely related to career architecture. If we start by thinking, okay, hiring at the partner level, we said earlier that these days it's a lot about sector credibility, the ability to originate work, to build a practice, commercial gravity. Can you speak a little bit further to these elements and explain from a practical perspective what it really is in a nutshell that a partner must bring to be successful in this current market?
Yeah, of course. This is a lot of the focus of my work, and it's trying to work out, I guess, from a firm's perspective, a consulting firm's perspective, is like, what's the revenue story and what is the likely success of a partner joining a firm? And then from a partner perspective, their lens is always, I guess, highlighting what their value is, thinking about what the business case to hire them is, and then making sure that that lands quite well. And look, partnerships and partner hiring is fundamentally about commercial gravity. And there's 2 points here, right? Like, firms evaluate client access and revenue potential. And then the second point is, of course, cultural alignment. And that does, to a degree, determine long-term success. Looking at the first point, from a partner candidate perspective, there's a few things that you should be doing, and there's a revenue story here, right? They're hiring a partner, they're looking at what the revenue potential could be. Firms are evaluating what the portability of client relationships are, and that's an important sort of aspect that you need to show in any interview is, look, this is my revenue story. This is essentially, and you need to focus on what your origination focus is. And then it's about, hopefully you have examples here where origination was not due to the platform that you were on, but rather something about you, maybe some entrepreneurial sort of something, or deep client relationships that have run over 5 years where you've been the transformation partner for a DAX 30 company, and bringing that to life. And then it can be quite hard, right? Because the portability of client relationships are very hard, because when a partner leaves one consulting firm and joins another, they sign contracts when they join the firm, when they join the partnership, that really exclude or preclude them from entering into any sort of commercial arrangement afterwards with that partner, or even contacting them for a period of time. So that bit can be quite tricky. But look, essentially a partner interview is a business case explaining why a firm should invest in you. And an interesting perspective I heard last week was, look, how do you approach these interviews? It's talking about the revenue story, the origination. You don't need a platform to operate. But also, I think, and this is very important, is explaining to a firm that you're interviewing with, look, this is the problem of my client base. This is what they're looking for, and this is my answer to the problem. And that's, I think, completely the value proposition, because you know what the market problem is, you know what the problem they're looking to solve, and you have the answer to that problem. And that's a very important aspect, right? Is always, yes, when you're interviewing as a partner, you're thinking about what the firm business case to hire you is, but top of that, they're thinking about what clients need in the market, and is this partner answering that need? Yeah.
And can you be more precise on this point? Speaking about the firm that is about to make a hire, what is it exactly that they are looking for to determine if a new partner can be successful? How does the decision-making framework look like based on your experience?
Okay. Yeah. A lot of the time, these partners are joining partnerships, and you need buy-in. There's normally like 1 or 2 internal sponsors that have decided quite early that this partner is the partner that we want to join the firm. And then it's an exercise in convincing partner colleagues, and probably a global committee and maybe a regional committee that decides this. So once that fit's established and you've got your internal sponsor, like, you're both essentially on the same team, and you both agree that you should join the firm. And it's about, there's a few sort of, I think, generic things which I could talk about, which run across firms, but then it's talking to the internal sponsor and just working out what's the market insight that you can give me to help me formulate my business case. And the business case usually focuses on what's the revenue potential, what's the portability of clients. Of course, you can't move past like what's the cultural alignment within the firm. What sort of model do they have? Do they have a you eat what you kill model, or is it sort of a team success based approach? And that alone changes the perspective of your business case, right? Whether you're partnering with people or you're expected to bring a certain amount of revenue, which you will then deliver on. The point I mentioned earlier is a lot of firms, and it's hard, try and distinguish whether a partner's prior success was due to the platform that they're on. Maybe they've got a large business development team, lead generation, that sort of filtered down, and maybe the partner just worked on the proposal, or there's something about that particular partner that allows them access to clients, and they are the trusted transformation or strategy advisor to 3 to 5 select firms. And normally at that point, they do want to see, okay, what are those relationships? Who are the first conversations you're going to have in the first 30 days after joining the firm? Why would they follow you? And this is when you have to have clear examples around prior work. And essentially, a partner interview is a confidence game, right? You need to increase the likelihood they'll hire you by showing them the business case to hire you and making it a no-brainer. Like, if they're going to hire you, they're going to get this, you're going to solve this particular problem for your client base. This is what your client base looks like. This is the likelihood of portability. You've got a view on what the pipeline of your clients look like in terms of where their consulting spend is coming. So yeah, a lot of these conversations are heavily pinned on commercials, and essentially, when you're hiring a partner, you're making an investment in their particular area. And the commercials are, look, a lot of firms want to see or need to see some sort of proof of concept in year one. In the first 6 months, I don't know if it's more due diligence focused. You likely should be winning a project. Where's that going to come to? So yeah, very much like the commercial angle at partner, but there's also the cultural alignment bit, right? And this is, I think, more important for smaller firms with smaller partnerships. They really do look at the culture of an individual and how their approach to business development and works. But then there's also another point, right? And maybe if I can flip it, someone being promoted to partner internally, and there's a lot of discord about this, but one I found quite interesting, and I hear this quite often with the top consulting firms, is deciding someone's promotion to partner or senior partner. They do look, it's not just about, is this person the rainmaker who's going to bring in revenue, but also, does this person hold the revenue to their own P&L, or do they share it with others and help sort of bring the firm up? Because that's what a lot of these sort of top consulting firms look for. Yes, they want the rainmaker, but they also want someone that can bring leaders up around them. And from a firm revenue perspective, it's a lot better if multiple partners working in this space, senior partner sharing revenue, as opposed to just keeping it quite close and tight.
What you're explaining certainly resonates with my perspective, but I'm wondering a little bit from where you're sitting and what you're seeing. It sounds very different if you become a promotee within the firm and you're getting promoted to partner versus you're an outside partner hire. The set of expectations seems to be very different. Would you tend to agree?
Very. Yeah. Completely. Bringing in an external partner is a definitive decision to grow in a particular area, and there needs to be some sort of revenue story attached to it, along with everything else that you would expect in terms of cultural alignment. Are they a practice builder? Are they going to be able to build, bring up others around them? And then internally, I think it's a completely different lens, right? Because they've got a complete view on, feedback on projects over the last, since you started with the firm, what the revenue sort of wins and losses have been. So they are two very different conversations. I obviously focus more on bringing in external talent for inorganic growth, whereas that's a conversation looking for organic growth within a firm and the future leaders that can be brought up.
Well, and then there's the economic argument, right? And it's particularly interesting. If you're a partner in an existing firm and you have your internal network, you have an base with the bonus and the salary, and maybe you have an equity component or a carry component. How do you evaluate if for your own sake, it could make sense to become a partner at a different firm? What are the trades-offs, and how do you evaluate this?
It's a good question, right? And like every conversation I have, like what I need to understand up front is sort of what the push and pull factors are. Like if you are interested in another firm, is there something pushing you away from that firm, or is something pulling you to another firm? And that pretty much, yeah, that's the key question I need to answer early on. Motivations, essentially. And look, I have a lot of these conversations where someone is likely to become a partner in 6 to 12 months, but they're not sure if it's the right platform that they're on. So that's the important question you should ask yourself. Is the platform you're on right for the niche area that you work in? If there is some hesitancy around that, or you're just unsure, exploring the market may be a useful exercise to go in. From one perspective, you could figure out that, look, I've spoken to my three core competitors. I know I'm exactly in the right platform for me based on A, B, and C. But you could figure out that maybe another company has a better platform for your particular area. Maybe they're looking for someone like you and there's a build mandate, whereas in your current firm, it may just be, okay, I'm be one of 10 partners working in this particular area. Whereas if I went to this firm, they want to put this level of investment. They've got one partner. There's a lot more green space to play in. With larger firms, what I see quite often is, look, because they're so large, you need quite a niche business case to become a partner. Like you need to focus on quite a narrow, defined part of the market, as opposed to firms that are smaller. There's the swim lanes to partner are a lot wider, and there's a lot more green space to play in. And both of those options could be better for different people. Maybe you want to be super niche and target a particular area because it aligns with your 10 to 15 year plan for yourself. But if you want to be a bit more general, maybe another firm is a better option for you. And of course, there's the third aspect, right? Through interviewing with your competitor firms, you're going to pick up a lot of signals around the market, how they are doing different things. So that should also be in the back of people's minds. Like it is a market insight gathering exercise, and it may result in you changing firms, or it may result in you being absolutely certain that the platform that you're on is markedly better than your competitors. And now you've got this additional market insight SWOT analysis through talking to these firms around how to succeed on your current platform.
Would you say that the latter is an intentional technique that some firms employ?
It's hard. It's hard to work that out. Look, if I were a senior partner or regional partner at a firm, and a direct competitor partner wanted to interview with me, and they focused on an area we were trying to grow in, like there's always going to be two pillars to this. One is, well, maybe they could lead this within our firm. And the second one, of course, is, look, I want to figure out what my competitors are doing. So I'm gonna have that conversation. But I don't see that as the main driver. I see that as a benefit of someone being interested in bringing in a practice builder. But it is completely like they're gonna get market insight that they're just not going to be privy to otherwise. So does that weigh in on their thinking? Potentially. From a candidate perspective, I think less so. I think that's just a benefit of going through a process, but I don't think that's a driver, because there's a lot of confidentiality, right? If you're interviewing for a partner position with another firm, I don't think you do it just from a market insight perspective, because a lot of these industries, although they're competitors, like they all know each other. And that decision to enter into a conversation with a competitor firm, you need to think that through. But look, I haven't seen it come out. It doesn't happen. There's an unspoken rule in the industry that, although your competitors and maybe you talk to them quite often, I have not seen sharing information of interviewed one of the partners in your team previously. Just doesn't happen.
Now, let's actually try to paint a picture, okay, of, let's say, a partner move that, first of all, failed. And I'm not speaking about a public disaster or anything, but a move where, based on your experience, the expectations didn't align, or the integration was rough, or the partner didn't compound their career in the way that was expected. Can you walk us through an example of such and explain what went wrong?
Yeah, it's this is a big part of what I do, is trying to work out the risk of someone bringing in a partner and what could go wrong. But look, I think the most common one that I see is actually from the firm's perspective that brings in a partner. There's some sort of misalignment within the firm before they brought that partner in, which has resulted when the partner lands, the expectations that were communicated to them just aren't a reality within the firm. Maybe someone who wasn't involved in the interview process is quite a big stakeholder for this particular partner that starts in a firm, and that relationship wasn't tested prior to them accepting an offer. So a lot of I'm not going to put the blame on firms, but I do see that quite often. They weren't completely aligned, and not everyone was brought into the conversation and all stakeholders agreed prior to a partner coming in. The other one is things just change. Macroeconomics, right? Bringing in a partner that focuses completely on sustainability in, I don't know, 2023, a year later, things change. So like market conditions do change as well. And then if I look from a partner perspective, why they may fail, they may start at a firm and realize that they don't have the right infrastructure, and maybe they need more infrastructure around them to be successful. They had that infrastructure at their last firm and they didn't realize how important it was. And now they've started, some can't operate without certain resources. And then, some partners, speak up the portability of their client relationships. And then when they land in a firm, they realize, then both sides realize, well, actually those relationships were quite heavily tied to the platform that they were with, not the individual partner. So that's probably the main one, if I be completely honest, is, the business case focused on 3 to 5 core clients. Those clients, for whatever reason, could not be brought across. The portability of those relationships didn't hold through. So then that partner is starting from zero, starting from nothing. Which, look, it's not always worst case scenario doesn't work. Sometimes it does work. And the partners that I see most successful, yes, they have their business case and they talk about the portability of client relationships, but they've also got a very clear methodology in terms of new business development and how it's done. And those are the partners that I see are most successful, to be honest. They've got, I don't know, maybe a 15-step sales cycle to bring someone in as a client, and they just keep passing through. They take it like a framework that needs to be done, doesn't work, through. And those are the partners that are most successful. Yes, they have client relationships, but they don't rely on them. They rely more on, commercial instinct and their own business development machine to continually bring people through a sales cycle, which hopefully for them ends up in, an engagement with clients.
And let's go back to the first case. Assume that you're a partner, you're successful in the firm, then you decide, for whatever motivation, for whatever reason, to change the firm and to become a partner in the new firm. And then again, for whatever reasons, it's not successful. Either the new firm's expectations were different, or what you promised was maybe a little bit of over-promising, but it's not successful. What happens next in this particular partner's career?
Yeah, it can be quite hard, right? Like, because if you look at a partner's profile and they're all public on LinkedIn, there needs to be some sort of narrative across it. And if you start at a firm and then 6 to 12 months later, you leave a firm, like that is a bit of a red flag. And it can be, I'm not going to say it's impossible to come back from that. It just can be a bit trickier, right? And there needs to be a narrative around why that move didn't work. And there's a lot of fair narratives out there that are completely correct and true. Internally, the firm you started at, things weren't right. They deprioritized certain areas. Maybe they hired another partner that actually worked in this space, and that partner brought a team of partners. So there was just a lot more. There was a lot more crowded. So when that happens, like, and I see this quite often, and you're interviewing with another firm, it's just about like explaining honestly what happened, why it didn't work. And look, partners are very good at convincing people of things, right? Commercially, they should have the instinct, the IQ, the EQ. They're very likely to create a narrative that is, one, true, and two, is compelling and convincing as to why things didn't work. Because the honest truth is sometimes things just don't work out for variables out of the control of the individual partner. And yeah, it's what I'm saying here is it's fine, but it does create a bit of a red flag on a CV or on a profile that just needs to be interrogated a bit more. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That all makes sense. And then I'm interested to learn a little bit more about your personal reflections. And if you look at career planning in consulting, if we go one step back and maybe already start a little bit at the mid-career consulting level right now, maybe a senior consultant or a manager or principal or something along these lines. What skills matter for them, and how should they be thinking about positioning themselves to eventually become a successful partner in an organization?
Yeah. Look, I guess in brief, I'm not saying anything that's sort of unknown to the market, but that mid-layer managers, principals are the operational engine of consulting, owning the delivery and being quite close to the client. Like, they really are the ones that translate the strategy into execution, something that's a bit more meaningful than the slides. And from my perspective, like, their importance does increase hugely as teams shrink, which is likely what's going to happen. The manager, I think, more, and I can see it now, like more stress and more responsibility, maybe you could say, is put on these managers as sort of the, I'm not going to call it, maybe the junior level, more transactional sort of data level isn't going to be there in the future. So I think they become even more important. And for them, like, they should be, and even when you start as a consultant, like, you need to figure out, and it takes a few years, what your niche or your super niche is going to be. And then you need to zero in and focus on it and become the expert globally, definitely in your country, for that area. And you should be building your partner case from a senior consultant manager level, and figuring out what it needs to be, talking to your career mentors, talking to recruiters, headhunters, to get a feel for the market and where it's going. But the partner case really does start at that manager level. Once you've decided to specialize, then you're building it, right? Like, every sort of client relationship that you can get involved with, show you're a trusted advisor, keep attuned and up to date with market developments and everything else. Talk to some competitors. Maybe you've probably got people from maybe your university or business school that are on the other side, and just, my advice was the partner case starts at a manager level once you decide to specialize and you go all in on that. And then it's having a check-in on yourself, maybe once a quarter or once a month, just to say, this is my partner case. Has anything changed? And you may be like 4 to 5 years away from actually presenting that case, but it's a good reflective exercise that I encourage managers and principals to go through, is just work out, when the partner interview discussion does happen, like, what really is my value proposition? Taking it back to my prior point, what are the problems within my niche? What are the clients looking to solve? What does that look like? And what do I bring to the market that helps solve that problem? And that starts at manager level.
And is there a generally held belief or common belief about career progression in consulting that you find yourself disagreeing with?
Yeah, there would be, right? Like, because there's a lot of politics and personalities and sort of ego stuff involved, but I don't think that's a specialty to the consulting market. I think it's probably a bit more pronounced in the market, but yeah, most definitely. Like there's a few different factors to this, right? Like, yes, you need to own your niche, super niche, but also from an internal perspective, you have to show your internal stakeholders, those that may promote or hold the pen on promoting, that you hold this information. And there is, as with any firm, there is a bit of politics at play, and you do need to, have your internal sponsors most definitely within a firm, and so that's sort of like the internal bureaucracy or navigating personalities, I think, is the nice way to put it. And you have to do this, right? Because you can be the best consultant in the room, best manager in the room, but if the right people don't see that, then the case for promotion is a lot harder. Do I agree with that? It's up to firms to decide. I focus more on like the experience level, the commercial nous. I hear stories about navigating personalities and politics within a firm, but gladly don't have to be involved in those conversations. I'm a fly on the wall.
And when you talk to more senior members of consulting firms, partners, other senior leaders about their careers, what's the most common regret that you may hear, or where they say they wish they had done something different earlier on?
That's a good question. I think, a common one is just seeing quite early where the market is going, but not jumping on that. Like, I speak to people who joined consulting in, I don't know, 2014, and then by 2015 were specializing in AI and data. Like, I don't know why they did that back then, but they clearly saw where the market was going and went early in on that. But in terms of other regrets, look, sometimes people move to firms where they didn't quite do their due diligence, and for some reason there's a misalignment, as we talked about, cultural. Maybe a firm's on the stock market, and they quickly realize they don't want to work for a firm that is publicly floated, because that stock price impedes certain decision making internally when it goes down. But yeah, by and large, it's partners that wish they had a sort of seen a market change a bit earlier, so they could have been at the frontier or the vanguard of that. It's partners that maybe joined a firm where they didn't correctly do their due diligence, or they got an offer to join a firm and they took the first one, as opposed to running competing boats at the same time. So you get to a point where, and I really recommend this, where you've got maybe 3 or 4 options, you've weighed them up, you've done your due diligence, you've compared them. That is the best space you want to be at when you go for a process, not a point where you get an offer and they say, look, we need a decision in the next 2 to 4 weeks. So you kind of maybe feel a bit pressured into taking that. But yeah, by and large, I think these partners, senior partners, yes, they're reflective, but they're also confident, right? So I could drill down and try figure these things out, but it's hard to distinguish sometimes.
Okay, and then let's slowly but gradually start wrapping up our conversation for today. And let's maybe take the different factors that we discussed today together. The AI-enabled delivery model, maybe more AI advancement, smaller senior-led teams, more specialized firms, private equity, capital influx, sharper expectations on origination, career progression. What does the consulting landscape look like in 5 years?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And it's one I'm trying to figure out every day. And yeah, it's a great question. And look, all of these firms, like, I'm not convinced they're completely certain on where things are going to be. So they've got very smart people within them trying to figure this out as well. And from talking across these firms, there is some themes which I can talk about, but there's also a lot of unknowns, right? But look, I think consulting is very much evolving, or maybe going back to being the judgment economy, the problem solving that we talk about, and then being AI enabled, which should save time at a more junior level. But then you also see problems in the market with this, right? Where certain companies have been found out for using ChatGPT and AI platforms to write complete strategy definition projects for governments and otherwise. So, look, I think there's two key points. So one is AI increases the supply of analysis, but then the human judgment becomes the important bit, and I think it becomes more scarce as sort of the pyramid or the juniors feeding up towards that maybe don't need to focus on it more. So yeah, it's definitely, from what I can see, it's still going to be an analysis judgment game, maybe even more so, and that network bit, or portability of commercials, if we can say it like that, is equally going to be important. But it's really hard, I think, to figure out where things are going to be in like 3 years, 5 years, because AI is evolving so quickly. And maybe these platforms are going to dive deeper into consulting, because a lot of them are doing it. A lot of the technology firms hire ex-partners and senior partners from top consulting firms to pretty much consult under their platform using only their tools. But I think the thing that doesn't change is the judgment, the problem solving, and the need to have a network. And that network, it's the client network that we talked about and the portability of that, but it's also a colleague network, right? Like having colleagues within your firm that can help build practices with you. Colleagues move on, keeping in touch with them, that's market insight. Maybe you want to join their firm. But yeah, the judgment and network thing, I think, is going to be the main focus as things become more AI enabled.
And what is your one-word answer? Is the clickbaiting LinkedIn wisdom true? Is consulting dead?
No. And maybe just quickly, because I deal a lot with this, it's just a new phase that consulting's going through. I think it's going to be the most existential and biggest phase. But look, we have seen this before, and the consulting market does adapt. Like at a basic level, the introduction of Excel in the 90s changed everything. The internet, even the .com bubble, it burst. Are we still using the internet? Yes, everything's a lot different. Cloud computing changed things. Like every 5 to 10 years, something big happens in consulting, which completely or marginally changes the model. And I think we're just going through a shift where the old playbook is changing, but consulting's not going to die, because yeah, I just can't picture an AI agent doing what a senior partner does and has learned over the last 20 to 30 years in terms of like the client interaction, judgment, and everything else we talked about. So no.
All right, Ben, then let's start wrapping up for today. And we have a closing tradition on this podcast. Can you tell me if there's someone or something that is inspiring you right now? Is there a particular book that you're reading, or a leader that you're following, something that is generally expanding your thinking, is inspiring you?
That's a good question. Look, I think from a general sense, maybe not a book or something like that, but I'm from New Zealand. My father is Māori, Indigenous New Zealand, and there's a lot of there's a lot of values within my culture that I pretty much use as my moral compass, right, and points me in the right direction. One is like monarchy, it's called, caring for others, and how we do that with no expectation of a reciprocal return, which I try and do quite often in my work. Two is, it's called whanaungatanga, which is connection, and that's essentially what my job is. It's connecting people and making sure there's some sort of fit around that connection. So those two, I guess, values are my Northern Star, I guess you'd call it in the Northern Hemisphere, but it would be called something different down south, that sort of anchor what I do, sort of how we can provide connections, make meaningful relationships, and then provide care within those relationships with no expectation of a reciprocal return. So yeah, those would be my two anchoring stones from my cultural heritage in New Zealand.
It's very powerful, and certainly principles that can be applied far beyond business. And if listeners remember, just one thing from our conversation today, one insight or one way of how they should think differently about maybe the career or the consulting market or the transition with AI, what's the thing you want our listeners to walk away with today?
Yeah, I think that no matter what level you're in, and even if you're not in consulting, from a hiring perspective, you should always be thinking about. I don't want to transactionalize things too much, but what is your business case? What is your value proposition? And you should be thinking about that at the start of your career, in the middle of your career, and at the end, to be honest. And maybe you should be thinking about the end goal a bit more. Um, and I see this very, very, very often when people are not clear on where they want to be, and what their business case, what their value proposition is. Searching for a job or doing anything in life really just becomes really hard because you don't know what the end goal is. You don't know what that looks like, feels like. So I think it's just being very clear on, no matter where you are in your career, what your value proposition is, to go back to a point, what question you're answering that clients or people in the market have a problem with, what problem you're trying to solve.
Well, then, Ben Appleton, thank you for this conversation.
Cool. Thanks, Lauren. Appreciate the chat. Cheers.
Cheers.